I will never forget the sound the sea made when I threw myself off the rail. It was as if a huge blue lung exhaled right beneath me, wrapping me in a cold that bit into my skin. The wind roared in my ears, and, for an instant, as I fell, I thought maybe I had miscalculated. But it didn't matter. I had seen her. Or so I thought. The gigantic figure had emerged from the mist like a living beacon. Her silhouette, enormous and feminine, swayed between the waves. I still remember the first impression. A woman about 10 meters tall, with dark hair that looked like algae lit by the moon. She wore a white dress that clung to her body with the moisture, waving like a lost flag in the sea. From my deck, she had seemed to ask for help, a raised arm. A gesture I interpreted as desperation. So I jumped without thinking, convinced that I was witnessing something impossible and yet real. As I swam toward her, I felt the foam hit my face and a primitive, tingling crawl up my spine. The sea was restless, as if it did not approve of my decision. Each stroke grew heavier, but I kept going, driven by a mix of fascination and duty. When I finally got within several meters of her, the world seemed to stretch. There she was, so immense that the horizon curved around her. But something didn't add up. Before we begin, I ask that you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us where in the world you're listening from. This helps us bring you more stories like this. Let's go. Her breathing, which I expected to hear like the deep whisper of a colossal being, was completely silent. Her eyes, which from afar had seemed full of anguish, now shone with a different shade, almost hypnotic. A silver reflection moved behind her pupils as if they held a secret that did not want to be discovered. She watched me. It wasn't the look of someone who needed help. It was the evaluating gaze of someone trying to figure out what you are and why you're approaching. "Are you okay?" I shouted as I tried to stay afloat in the turbulent waves. My voice sounded tiny compared to her presence. Her lips curved slightly, not in a smile, but in a soft gesture, almost intrigued. Then she tilted her head as if studying my attempt at heroism. The water around her was eerily still, as if the ocean obeyed her will. "I did not ask to be saved," she said. Her voice was deep, beautiful, and strangely calm. It sounded as though she spoke from several depths at once, from the surface down to the bottom of the sea. A chill ran through me. I had jumped purely on intuition, on that human instinct that pushes us to help what we believe is fragile. But nothing about her was fragile. Suddenly, I understood that the raised arm I had interpreted as a plea for help might not have been that. Maybe it had been a warning, a gesture to keep distance, or something much more mysterious. "I thought you were in danger," I replied with a trembling voice, fighting against a wave that tried to swallow me. "You looked trapped." She blinked slowly. Every movement of hers displaced the air around me, as if she breathed the atmosphere and shaped it. "It is not I who is in danger," she said. Her gaze lowered toward me with unsettling delicacy, like someone watching a small bird that has flown too close. "The mistake has been yours." The sea, as if reacting to her words, began to churn violently. An unexpected current pulled at my legs. I tried to swim backward, but the water became dense, resistant, as if something invisible surrounded me. "What do you mean?" I shouted, my throat burning from the salt. She lowered her hand toward me, but not to take me, not to help me. It almost seemed like she was pointing at me, marking me with her attention. "Not everyone you find in the sea wishes to be found," she murmured. Her words floated between the waves like an ancient warning. Then I saw it. Behind her, beneath the surface, a gigantic shadow moved slowly. It wasn't hers. It couldn't be. That thing was even bigger, deeper, more patient. A shape I could barely discern, but one I felt had been watching me long before I jumped. And in that instant, I understood. It wasn't me who had discovered her. It was she who had allowed me to see her. And maybe that was precisely the problem. "I think I've made a mistake," I whispered, though the wind tore the words from me. She closed her eyes as if she already knew. The sea ended up swallowing me in a whirlpool I had never felt in all my years sailing. The current dragged me downward with a violence that seemed to have its own intention. My chest burned, my ears thundered with the roar of the water, and even so, in the middle of the liquid darkness, I saw her descending with me. The giant woman submerged with an impossible elegance, her white silhouette cutting through the depth as if she belonged to a realm where gravity obeyed other laws. I struggled to keep my eyes open as the bubbles escaped my mouth, rising toward a surface that drifted farther away each time. Suddenly, I felt enormous hands, her hands holding me with a softness I did not expect. She wasn't squeezing me, she wasn't trying to immobilize me. She simply held me, preventing the current from tearing me apart. Her fingers, cold and strong, were like liquid columns, stabilizing me in the middle of the vortex. She brought me closer to her face, so large that I could see every drop clinging to her eyelashes, shining like underwater crystals. Her eyes no longer had the silvery shade from before. Now they were deep, dark, as if they reflected the entire night of the ocean. "You should have stayed on the ship," she said. And even though we were submerged, her voice filtered through the water like a thought that didn't need air to travel. "You still don't understand what you've interrupted." I wanted to respond, but my lungs were demanding oxygen. She seemed to notice. With an almost maternal movement, she lifted me toward an air pocket formed between two enormous underwater rocks. There, I was able to breathe, though trapped in a mixture of humidity and vertigo. When my lungs stopped burning, I dared to ask, "Who are you? And what was that shadow behind you?" She adjusted herself, kneeling on the sandy floor. Though still gigantic, there was something vulnerable in the way she avoided looking directly toward the darkness behind her. Her white dress floated around her like a cloud trapped at the bottom of the sea. "My name is Araya," she said, with a whisper that made the rocks tremble. "And you shouldn't have seen what lives down there." I felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold. "I thought you needed help," I insisted, searching for a clearer answer. "I saw you raise your arm." Araya narrowed her eyes, as if reliving that gesture. "I wasn't asking for help. I was warning the ocean to pull back. There are things that awaken when they shouldn't." The shadow I had seen came alive in my memory. More than a creature, it seemed like an immense serpentine outline, as if the sea itself had taken the shape of a guardian. "What is it?" I asked, unable to contain the growing unease in my voice. She didn't answer right away. Several seconds passed in which the water seemed to become denser, more silent. Finally, she said, "An ancient protector. It was created to watch over me, and to watch over anyone who approaches." "But it wasn't protecting you," I replied, recalling the tension in her gaze. "It seemed to be watching you too." Araya lowered her eyes. It was the first time I noticed a hint of sadness in her expression. "Because my existence is not free. I am a vestige of something the world has already forgotten, and you, without meaning to, have interfered with its guard." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm sorry," I said, though I knew such a small word couldn't encompass the magnitude of that disaster. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble." She raised her hand, the same one I had interpreted from the surface. She moved it slowly, as if tracing an invisible signal. "You didn't do it out of malice. You did it because you saw someone in danger. That honors you, but it also puts you at risk." The water behind her began to vibrate. It wasn't a normal movement, but a rhythmic, deep pulsing, like a gigantic heart awakening. Araya straightened, and for the first time I saw something like fear on her face. "There isn't much time," she said. "The protector believes you are a threat." "Me? I'm just an ordinary human." "Precisely," she murmured. "Small humans are unpredictable to him. He doesn't understand their intentions, and a misunderstanding can be fatal." My breathing quickened again. "Then let me return to the surface. You can take me," but Araya shook her head slowly. "If I take you now, he will interpret it as me favoring you over him, and that could trigger something impossible to stop." Before I could respond, the shadow moved again, this time closer, enormous, imposing. "Araya," I said in a threat of voice. What are we going to do? She looked at me with unexpected determination. We're going to hide, and then I'll explain why I'm not the only giantess who inhabits this sea. The refuge Araya took me to was not a place I could have imagined even in my strangest dreams. We slipped through a narrow underwater passageway where enormous rock columns formed natural arches covered in luminescent moss. The greenish glow illuminated Araya's skin, giving her an ethereal appearance, as if she were an ancient spirit guiding an intruder too small to understand that realm. As we moved forward, she held my body in one of her hands, protecting me from the torrent roaring behind us. I heard the distant echo of the protector, a deep rumble that vibrated through the very structure of the ocean. It felt as if a mountain were moving with purpose. "Hurry," Araya said, although it was obvious I couldn't speed anything up. Her steps were firm, silent, almost ceremonial. The water around us began to warm, a sign that we were approaching a volcanic area. We finally emerged into a partially enclosed cavern where the water's surface formed an inner lagoon. Araya placed me on a rocky platform, large enough for me to keep my balance. She, due to her size, remained in the water, with only the upper part of her torso visible, like a colossal statue resting in a flooded temple. "We're safe for now," she said, although her gaze conveyed that safety was relative. The cavern was lit by natural crystals embedded in the walls, pulsing with a bluish light. They reflected her gigantic face, accentuating her delicate features. And although she was soaked, her white dress remained adhered to her figure with a constant motion, as if it were breathing. I sat down, still trembling from the mix of cold, fear, and awe. "You said you're not the only giantess in this sea," I murmured. "What does that mean?" Araya lowered her gaze, as if thinking about her answer was painful. "There are 3 of us," she finally said. 3 guardians created in an era when the seas and the skies were different. I am the youngest. "Guardians of what?" "Of balance," she replied, without hesitation. "Of secrets that were never meant to fall into human hands. And of the protector you just saw, who was not always a threat." Something in her tone made me feel a stab of compassion. "Does he fear you, or does he control you?" Both Araya moved a little closer, her face level with mine, though she remained in the water. We were created to coexist with him. But something changed centuries ago. Now, he is a shadow of what he was, driven by impulses I no longer understand. The crystal's light danced in her eyes, and for an instant I perceived an unfathomable sadness. It was strange to see such an imposing, extraordinary figure showing such human emotions. "And the other 2 guardians?" I asked. "Where are they?" Araya took a deep breath. The air trembled. "One disappeared. The other is looking for me." She paused for a long moment, and I'm not sure her intention is to protect me. A chill ran down my spine. Not because of the threat itself, but because of the idea that more beings like her existed, each with unknown motivations. "Why is she looking for you?" "Because I broke a rule," she said, with unexpected sincerity. "I came too close to the surface. I allowed humans to see me when I shouldn't have. And now, with your presence here, I fear she will interpret this as a betrayal of the original purpose of our existence." The word betrayal echoed through the cavern like an ancient refrain. "But I only tried to help you," I said. "I didn't know anything about this world." "I know," she replied. "But giants don't always judge humans by their intentions, only by the consequences." A deep roar resounded in the distance. The ripples in the water stirred. Araya turned her head with a tense expression. "The protector is coming," I said, feeling fear rise in my chest. "No," she murmured. "This sound is different." Her eyes widened. "She is here." Before I could process it, a pink glow illuminated the entrance of the cavern. The water began to swirl, forming a gentle yet imposing vortex. A gigantic figure slowly emerged, even taller than Araya, with golden hair that shone like living metal. She wore a long dress in coral tones that flowed with supernatural elegance. Her eyes, an almost electric blue, fixed on me immediately. Araya moved instinctively, positioning herself between us. "Sorel," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't do this." The newcomer smiled not with malice, but with an air of calm superiority. "Dear sister," she said, "I've come precisely because you already have." Her gaze fell on me again, analytical, curious, dangerous. "So this is the human you risked everything to save." The coral-colored light surrounding Searle filled the cavern like an underwater sunrise. I felt my own shadow tremble against the rock as that giant woman advanced. Her presence wasn't violent, but it was imposing, as if the water itself bowed to let her pass. Her golden hair floated around her face, creating a halo that made it difficult to look at her directly without feeling a strange vertigo. Araya kept her arm extended in front of me, a living barrier between the newcomer and my fragile human form. I could barely breathe, not because I lacked air, but because I sensed I had stepped into a conflict that had been forming for centuries. Sorel stopped right at the mouth of the cavern, placing a hand on the rock. Her long, elegant fingers left marks of pink light where they touched, as if her energy leaked into the world. Her eyes narrowed as she observed Araya with a mixture of disappointment and affection. "You shouldn't have brought him here," she said, and her voice resonated in the cavern like a deep chant. "I didn't bring him," Araya replied, without moving a single muscle. "He jumped to help me. He thought I was in danger." Sorel tilted her head, studying me as if I were a tiny, curious creature rescued by a child. "Humans always believe they can save what they don't understand." "He didn't know who I was," Araya replied, her tone firmer. "Don't judge him for acting out of compassion." Sorel sighed, and the sound traveled along the walls like a gentle wave. "I am not judging him for his compassion. I am judging him for his risk." Her eyes returned to me, shining like stars trapped in salt water. "Do you know what you have awakened with your intrusion, little human?" I felt the weight of her question like an anchor on my chest. "I only saw someone I thought needed help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If my presence caused problems, I'm sorry, but I don't regret jumping." For an instant, Sorel seemed surprised by my sincerity. A barely noticeable smile softened her features. "You have courage," she murmured. "And courage is dangerous when it is born in a fragile world." Araya stepped forward, creating a gigantic wall between Searle and me. "I won't let you harm him." "Harm him," Sorel repeated, as if tasting the word. "I'm not here for that. I am here because the Protector has fully awakened. And you know what that means?" The name fell between us like a silent thunderclap. Araya bowed her head, closing her eyes with sorrow. "That there isn't much time." "No," Sorel said. "That something in the ocean has changed. Something none of us can ignore." The cavern vibrated with a distant rumble. This time, it wasn't the Protector. It was something deeper, vaster. Something that made the water tremble like a taut string. Sorel looked up at the ceiling of the cavern. "The greater current has fractured. The balance is breaking, and you are here, hiding with a human." Araya opened her eyes slowly. "I was protecting him. I didn't want to drag him into our conflict." "He is already inside it," Sorel said, looking straight into my eyes. "He saw us, he heard you, or he felt the call. Whatever the reason, he is now bound to this destiny." "Bound how?" I asked, feeling a shiver that didn't come from the water. "I don't understand anything." Sorel moved a bit closer, reducing the distance between our colossal scales. I could see her clearly then. Her skin had a soft glow, and her eyes held a wisdom that didn't belong to any mortal creature. "Any life that observes a guardian becomes marked by the greater current," she explained. "It is not a punishment, nor an honor. It is simply a consequence. You are no longer a casual observer. Now you are a piece." I placed my hand on my chest, though I didn't feel anything physical there. "A piece of what?" Sorel smiled with a mix of compassion and gravity. "Of restoration. Or collapse." The deep rumble returned, this time stronger. A pulse of water traveled through the cavern, dimming part of the crystalline light. Araya looked at me with an urgency she hadn't shown before. He is using the currents to track us. It won't take long for him to discover this place. Then we must move, Sorel said. Together. Together, I asked, stunned. Yes, replied the giantess, with golden hair, because even if you don't believe it, you are now the only variable that could change what's coming. Araya turned to me, her face so close I could feel the gentle warmth emanating from her damp skin. You must trust us. What is about to awaken could remake the entire world, or drown it. The water vibrated for a third time, stronger, more urgent. Sorel extended her hand toward me with unexpected softness. Come, human. The journey has not yet begun, and though my heart beat with a primitive terror, I also knew it was already impossible to return to the surface as if nothing had happened. She was right. I was already part of this. The cavern shook with a new intensity, as if the entire ocean were struggling to breathe. I felt the floor vibrate beneath my feet, and small lines of light fractured across the crystals embedded in the walls. Something was awakening. Something that didn't belong to any era known to humans. Sorel held me with both hands now, as if she were weighing me, my existence, my role. The way she looked at me wasn't superior, it was recognition. A careful judgment. Araya approached from behind, her enormous silhouette casting a protective shadow over the three of us. We must take him to the greater current, Sorel said, before the protector fully tracks us. Araya shook her head softly. The greater current is unstable. Bringing him there could break him. Then the alternative is to let the protector destroy him. Sorel replied without harshness, only with the serenity of someone stating an inevitable fact. My heart lurched violently. What is in that current? What would it do to me? Araya bent down to meet my height. Her enormous dark eyes softened as she looked at me. The greater current binds lives to the destinies of the ocean. It gave us form and purpose. To you, it could give a connection you do not yet understand. A connection for what? To survive, murmured Sorel, and to decide what we cannot. Before I could respond, an explosion echoed outside the cavern. The water recoiled as if something gigantic had struck the exterior. Araya lifted her gaze, alert, and Sorel tightened her grip around me, shielding me from the impact. The protector had arrived. A cyclopean shadow crossed the entrance of the cavern, so massive that its outline distorted the light. It wasn't a common animal. It was an ancient form, closer to a living mountain than to any sea creature. Its eyes, enormous and opaque, opened like extinguished beacons. A deep vibration filled the water, making me tremble from head to toe. It was a call, a warning, a claim. Sorel straightened with fierce elegance. He will not attack if we don't provoke him. He has already provoked, Araya said softly. He can feel the rupture in the current, and he feels this human as the cause. My breathing quickened. The creature emitted another vibrating pulse that made droplets of water rise instead of fall. The world seemed to invert for brief moments. Araya extended her arms in a gesture of calm, a ritual posture. Let me speak to him, she said. But before she could approach, the protector released an explosion of energy that struck the rocks and split a column in two. The sound was deafening. I instinctively covered my head, though I knew it wouldn't help much. The monster advanced a little farther. Its titanic face twisted by an emotion I never imagined could be perceived in such a creature. Confusion. Sorel held me closer to her chest to protect me. He doesn't understand. He is divided. The current tells him to attack, but his ancient loyalty to us restrains him. Araya took a step forward. Let me try the giantess. Submerged partially and advanced slowly, ceremonially. The protector released another muted roar, but this time did not strike. Araya raised a hand toward him, in the same way I had seen her from the surface hours earlier. That gesture, I had misinterpreted it. It wasn't a call for help, it was a decree, an ancient language. The vibrations began to calm. The water stopped oscillating. For a moment, the protector seemed to relax. But then, like a storm refusing to die, the greater current burst in one final pulse that passed through us. The cavern lit up with blue and silver light. I felt my body float outside myself, as if something invisible were dissolving me and reassembling me in an instant. Sorel still held me, but her grip no longer had the same control. I was connected to something, to them, to the ocean, to the current. Araya turned toward me with an expression I never imagined seeing on a gigantic, ancient face. Hope. "The current has chosen you," she said, her voice trembling. Cyril added, "Now you can do what we cannot." The protector leaned toward me, not to attack, but to observe. Its cyclopean eyes flickered with a soft light, as if for the first time, it understood who I was. Instinctively, I lifted my hand, imitating Araya's gesture. A simple movement human, but the current amplified it. A wave of calm swept through the ocean. The rocks stopped vibrating. Light returned to the crystals. The protector stepped back, not out of fear, but in recognition. It had accepted my presence. Sorel smiled, radiant as a marine aurora. The balance is not lost. Araya inhaled deeply, filled with relief. "And you, little human, no longer belong solely to the surface." The water around us lit up once more, like a silent applause from the ocean. And in that moment, I knew my life had changed forever. I was not a spectator. I was a bridge between two worlds I was only beginning to understand. "What happens now?" I asked, feeling as though the entire ocean awaited my next word. Cyril responded with a mysterious gleam in her eyes. "Now, the most extraordinary part of your story begins," Araya added softly. "And you won't be alone." Everything turned to light, and the sea embraced me as if welcoming me home. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. That helps us keep bringing more enchanting stories like this to brighten your day. And tell us in the comments from which city in the world you're listening to us. See you next time.